Hello, everyone. Hello again. It's great to see you. The time has come for the final part of our final session of our conference today. It is called Ethics and Sustainable Development in the Context of Techno-Social Challenges. And it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome all of you on behalf of the organizers of today's conference, namely Ormasz Łukasiewicz, the Faculty of Philosophy at the University of Warsaw, and the Center for Ethics of Technology at the Humanites Institute. Before we start, let me...
Macieju, please let me inform you that we have some problem with your video. We cannot see you.
But can you hear me?
Yes, but we cannot see you.
Okay,
only a black screen.
Strange. Maybe I'll join you. Maybe I'll try to switch off and join the conference again, okay? I don't know what this might be. Everything is turned on, so I'm not muted, and the camera is on, so I don't know what's happening.
We cannot see you.
Okay, so let me join the conference again. Just let me in when I click the link again, okay?
Okay.
In a second.
Oh, please wait a little. Just maybe 2 or 1 minute technical break for moderator.
Hello again. I hope that you can see me.
We still have
hear.
the same problem. We can see only a black screen. But
I don't know what I can do about it, but I think that at least if you can hear me. So let me introduce our first guest, our first speaker. I have a pleasure to introduce Dr. Brand Dano, who's assistant professor at Maynooth University in Ireland. And together with Professor Philip Bray of Twente University, he is a creator of ethics by design approach developed for the EU as a requirement for AI research. He is also active in the IEEE for developing standards for ethical AI. And the title of his talk will be EU Guidelines Ethics by Design for AI. Hello, Brand. It's great to have you with us. And I hand the microphone over to you. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will just do the sharing of the PowerPoint thing. Where are we? Window. Okay, I'm hoping you can all see that slide now.
Yes.
Yes,
definitely.
Great. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly run you through a very brief overview of what we're doing in the EU regarding ethics by design, and then give you a very brief couple of conclusions to those. So, as you're aware, there's a wide range of funding initiatives within the EU for artificial intelligence. My understanding is that this is around about 1.5 billion per year. I'm primarily these days occupied as an ethical reviewer of research applications, so everything from the Pathfinder through to Horizon Europe and so on. What we did was we took the ethical component from trustworthy AI through a project called the Sienna Project to develop guidelines that were a lot more concrete for artificial intelligence application development than detailed in the trustworthy AI component. What we were trying to do was avoid asking engineers and computer scientists to do philosophical deliberations. So we effectively reduced this to a series of concrete tasks. It's a fairly exhaustive list, but it's not necessarily applicable to every application, and it's not necessarily and it's not necessarily going to cover absolutely everything. I mean, people will create things we haven't anticipated yet. As of March of last year, any application for funding for artificial intelligence research that's going through the EU must demonstrate an awareness of these requirements. And while it doesn't actually have to use our particular system, it has to demonstrate an awareness of those requirements in some way, shape or form. And what we've produced for the European Union is designed really to do that work for them. It also, a lot of the principles that are embedded in it are also going to be found in the Artificial Intelligence Act next year, though that's still being fine-tuned, but it is already going to generate requirements for the compliance certification that's going to be required for a class of artificial intelligence applications. Once the act is complete, and as some of you are, I'm sure, aware, there's a bit of debate about exactly where that cutoff point will be in terms of what requirements are. So it's as it says, it's not a methodology, it's just an approach, just like any other values by design approach. It's been specifically designed so that it can fit into any artificial intelligence, any development methodology that you're using. So it's following the normal pattern. We have a set of values that have been defined. They are as much as possible as broadly applicable and acceptable on an international basis as we can. Those then generate norms, what we call ethical requisites or requirements. So these are things that an artificial intelligence system must be able to do. And sometimes they are things that the organization that is building it or deploying it must be do. So it's not limited purely to the functionality of the system. This produces a series of guidelines which really boil down to tasks, specific things that must be done at various stages in the development cycle. And then what we did was we developed a generic model of software development, which is applicable to pretty much anything and can then easily be mapped onto the particular development methodology that you're using. So, for example, every artificial intelligence application has to bring in data from somewhere. So there are a series of specific tasks that we can associate with the import and the processing of data during the development cycle. So we have 6 value categories. Some of them are broader than others. So we have respect for human agency. So this is things like autonomy. An artificial intelligence system shouldn't make substantial decisions affecting people's lives. That's something that has to be decided by humans and so on. Data governance covers both privacy, GDPR, but also things like algorithmic bias and just generally all the aspects of working with data in an artificial intelligence system. Fairness, I think, is reasonably straightforward. The systems mustn't harm individual social or environmental well-being. They must be transparent, and this is possibly one of the biggest changes. That is to say, at critical points throughout the system must be able to explain itself. We must have systems for understanding what data is being used, how it's being used. You're seeing already conflicts over this regarding the source data for things like ChatGPT and so on. We require that sort of stuff is accessible and understandable by all stakeholders, understood as in the widest possible context. So not just end users, but those who are the subject of AI activities and decisions as well. That supports what we consider to be possibly the most important values, which is accountability and oversight. That is to say, the developers and or the operators of an artificial intelligence system are to be held accountable for its effects, and they must have mechanisms for managing it. So, for example, we would require that a decision which has a substantial impact on somebody's life can be explained to them. In other words, the artificial intelligence has to have a mechanism by which it can explain what it did to come to that conclusion. And that decision must be appealable. And the system, should it be decided that the system has made an error, then the system must be modifiable. And we must have documentation at various stages along the way to hold people accountable for these decisions. So the basic process we're working from is, once we've got, these are typically 2 or 3 sentence descriptions, they're fairly straightforward. These values then lead to requirements. So the requirements are going to be particular elements of functionality within the system, and also particular mechanisms that are used during the development process. The idea is to build ethical compliance into the system from the beginning. In other words, it becomes part of the very initial design of the system. What we're trying to avoid is this well-known phenomenon now where an artificial intelligence system or a technology is released into the environment and we then discover what problems it can create. What we're seeking to do is mitigate as many of those as possible by forcing people to consider them and forcing them to build mechanisms in to avoid them and holding them accountable for how they do that. So not only must they document what they've done to comply with this, they must be able to justify why they did it that particular way. So I'm aware that time is short, so I can't possibly go into the details, but basically at the end of this, in the main EU guidance document on this, we've identified 63 specific tasks that must be performed at specific stages in the development cycle. What I'm starting to see is the rise of subsections of this type of approach. So there's a paper that will be coming out soon from Cambridge University that talks about, has an idea of what they call DC check. They've taken a similar approach to the importation and processing of data in an artificial intelligence system. So they've taken values, created norms, and then developed a series of tasks that must be performed when you import the data into the system. So what I thought I'd do is I'd just give a straightforward and simple example from fairness. So one of the values that falls under the category of fairness is very simple. An artificial intelligence system must be fair. That generates a range of requirements, one of which is an artificial intelligence system should avoid algorithmic bias. So the way you would implement that requirement is effectively a norm, falls into a series of tasks, but one of them, which we like to push quite hard, is you have to assume all the learning data that you bring into the system is biased until demonstrated not to be. So that generates, as you can see there, a series of specific tasks. You've got to build functionality into the system in order to assess its bias, and you're going to have to build mechanisms in to mitigate that bias. And you have to understand that as data is manipulated through learning processes and so on, or annotation of modeling and so on, that you could introduce new biases. So you've got to maintain bias assessment and mitigation processes from one end of the development cycle, initial design, right the way through to testing and post-deployment. You need to document this because you have to be accountable for it, and you need to be able to justify your choice of mitigation methodology and so on. And then you need mechanisms for people outside the process to report a bias, possible bias and so on. And if you start to think this through, you can see that you're going to need management and development processes within the development cycle, because you'll need mechanisms for programmers to detect bias, to report bias. You'll need mechanisms for ensuring that something is done about that. You'll need to document all of these procedures and so on. So it requires a modification to pretty much every aspect of the development cycle. Version control systems may need modification. Certainly organizational structures and processes will need modification. And there's no getting around it. This adds a burden to the development cycle. and we think that's just an inevitable price to pay. The current status of the situation is looking at the applications that are coming in. I would regard awareness of the ethical requirements for artificial intelligence applications as low, and the awareness of our guidelines as practically non-existent. Almost all of the applications for artificial intelligence project funding that I'm seeing have very, very limited ethical components, in a lot of cases none, and to be frank, some of the ones that we're turning down are just absolutely horrific. It's crazy, some of the stuff that people are trying to get funding for. An ordinary person on the street without any real understanding of this stuff would see that these things are clearly dangerous or unethical. There is a good awareness of trustworthy AI, the H-leg work and so on, but again, a limited awareness of the ethical components within that. And we're also starting to see the rise of an objection to the very concept of trustworthy AI, which I have to confess I'm sympathetic to. To me, the idea of asking about trustworthy AI is asking about trustworthy electricity. AI is a generic technology, it's not a thing. So I'm not sure that it's a coherent concept. And certainly that's the kickback that we're just starting to see. In general, for most people designing these AI projects, and people out in the field who are deploying them and so on, ethics means there's a legal requirement and a checklist somewhere, and provided you fulfill the legal requirement and you can tick the right boxes in the checklist, that's the job done. That's not going to be sufficient, because those don't demonstrate a sufficient understanding of the depth to which ethical compliance in our artificial intelligence systems goes into the organizational structures and so on. Organizational structures will require functional components to support them, and vice versa. So we'll have to see some change in the understanding of how systems are developed, what sort of organizational structures are appropriate, and we are starting to see a certain amount of kickback on that. So what I'm informally coming to as a conclusion is that it's not safe at this stage to rely on computer scientists to determine their own ethical requirements. There's limited to no education in that in computer science degrees, and even if we were to bring it into all universities immediately, the majority of the people building artificial intelligence right now have left university, so it wouldn't affect them. There's a movement in codes of conduct, professional certifications and so on. It will change over time, but I think we're probably likely to see 5 to 10 years of turbulence in this respect, which is why we've tried to create very, very concrete, specific tasks. So that's it in a nutshell. I've listed here relevant publications. In terms of their increasing depth, we've published a paper on this in AI and Ethics Journal. I've got a slightly bigger chapter that goes into more depth that's come out in a book recently. And then, of course, you go to the official EU guidance document, which has been taught to all the people within the European Union that are approving funding and so on. And then we've also taken that one step further into how to apply that to other forms of emerging technologies. Okay, that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Brent. I'm not sure if I'm remaining invisible, but I do hope that I can be heard. Thanks a million for this very insightful talk. I'd like to remind everyone that we have time for questions after the session, after the talks are over. So I do believe that we will have questions to your presentation. And thanks a lot for a moment. Now it's time to introduce our second speaker, who is Dominik Zieliński, sociologist and expert on technology assessment at the Nicolaus Copernicus University in Toruń. And his talk is entitled Led by Example, Introduction to Techno-Social Challenges in Sustainable Public Architecture. Hi, Dominik, and thank you very much for being with us. The stage is yours.
Hello, thank you for having me. So I'm changing topic a little. I mean, it's not AI, but I think the principle is the same, ethics and sustainability. To start, what I will talk about. I will talk about first modern city challenges, which are increasing and they are multiplicating. And one of the most current is the sustainability. Then I will share with you my view about the role of public institution in all of this. And then I would like to tell you about my plans for the future research regarding this topic. To begin, I don't think I have to explain that we have the climate change and that it's getting worse and worse. But what this means for a city, I see it in two ways. First of all, it's implicating on life conditions. Basically, life is getting harder. The life condition is degrading. The temperatures are worse. The quality of air is getting more polluted. So it's just straightforward. People are feeling worse. Moreover, for a city, the challenge is emerging regulations. On the plus side, the regulations are targeted at increasing the life conditions. So returning to, let's say, default state in which living is nice, but the regulations are a challenge itself because city must transform, because people must transform to realize these regulations into life. So this is a situation in which it's not easy to function. And a quick reminder what I mean by sustainability. The first definition is by UN, which means meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And in case of city challenges, I would like to move to definition of resilience, which is an ability of urban system to maintain or rapidly return to desired functions in the face of a disturbance, to adapt to change, and to quickly transform systems that limit current or future adaptive capacity. That's definition by Miro Newell Stoltz from 2015. And diving further into the definition, what is an urban system? It's, again, the same authors claim that urban system, we can look at it as a socio-ecological and socio-technical networks across temporal and spatial scales. And that means we have kind of this triangle in which we have society, nature, and materiality. I'm not sure materiality is the best word to describe it, but let's stay with it for now. And those three aspects are spread across time and space. So we have this dynamic system, complex dynamic system, and we said that resilience is about performing functions. And today, well, actually, for most of the time, cities are multifunctional, especially the biggest ones. The functions may be, for example, housing, education, culture, commerce, research and development, etc. It might be more. And the Clement and Pinot claim that the greatest weight of transformation burdens the biggest multifunctional cities. And I think I agree with that because it's more complex system. It's getting more complex with every aspect we add to it. And to sum this up, I think what is most efficient to take care in this matter are buildings, because they are among the most emission-intensive sectors regarding the city, and buildings usually serve these functions: housing, education, culture, etc. They all need buildings of some sort. So they are a big part of our life and big part of this triangle of nature, materiality, and society. Now, this challenge of sustainable buildings I simplified it to 2 ways. One is this material. One is this material, which means, for example, sustainable materials, the circular economy, or lowering energy consumption throughout whole life cycle. And well, actually, it's not only material, because as you can see, circular economy, it can mean materials which can be used more than one time, but also it requires some kind of institution, some kind of social consent to perform this kind of economy, as well as lowering energy through whole life cycle means changing people's behavior. And thus we come to this society part in which people must change their behavior, which, and this is where it's getting problematic. First of all, behavior change is not something easy to do, especially on a large scale. And moreover, Barber claims that in order to really make sustainable buildings, we have to sacrifice our comfort, which is not that hard in the sense that comfort is something individual. It's a cultural term. Comfort in different areas of world means something different. For some people, 25 degrees is okay. For some people, 20 is okay. So it's something that we have to change. But well, I don't think it would be easy. And all of this comes down to market, which has a big influence on how the construction market is developing, what materials are used, what is marketed as attractive solutions. So we have this situation in which we'd like to have sustainable solutions, but they are not attractive for consumers and for investors. So what can we do about it? Well, one of the answers is public institutions. Of course, not only, but one that I am interested in, and I would like to back up by use of Bourdieu's symbolic power and the narration reception theory, which means basically that the public institutions have the authority to influence changes. They can serve as an example, as in the title, they can lead by an example. And also they have the leverage of a lot of money to spend. For example, in Poland, by year, it is about 64 million spent for public procurement. And also returning to the multifunctional cities, usually the state is central. So the bigger the city, the more institutions are in the city. And it is not a new concept that public procurement is used as a tool to influence social change. But what interests me, and this is the part when I say what I would like to research, is what does it exactly mean? I mean, I would like to focus on the material side. I mean, the buildings that are in some kind of space and that they influence local environment, local society. And I think interesting questions are, what should be the specific characteristics in terms of spatial and socio-technological aspects? And would the public utility buildings be responsive to the spatial and socio-cultural conditions of its location? Then which actor groups should be involved or are involved in the design and the construction of public utility buildings? Then important for the symbolic matter, would the public utility building be a reference point for pro-environmental changes and new sustainable standards in the city? And finally, what factors would facilitate or hinder the implementation of sustainable, resilient building projects? Those factors would be social, spatial, technological, institutional. And I think it is very interesting to research on how different groups of people are involved in the construction of public spaces, public buildings, and moreover, accepting the role of public institution, which is kind of role of a teacher, showing the way to how to evolve, how to grow. And that's all from me now. And thank you very much for your attention. And I will be glad to ask any questions about this.
Thank you so much, Dominik. Great talk, very interesting. I do believe that we will have questions about it. And now it's time to introduce our third speaker. It's my pleasure to welcome Veikko Ikonen from Technical Research Center in Finland. Veikko is design anthropologist, working as a senior research scientist and team leader. He's focused on human-driven design of future technologies, applications and services, and his research interests include also ethical issues. Veikko will talk about responsible research and innovation, SDG, and research integrity. Hi, Veikko. Pleased to meet you, and I hand over the microphone and the stage to you.
Thank you, Maciej. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Good. And the presentation mode is on. So I will start. It's a pleasure to be here. As you see, I'm not anymore working as a researcher. I'm the manager of responsible research and innovation at VTT Technical Research and Center of Finland. I will share a 10-minute experience about that, how we really implement, integrate RRI, another acronym, SDGs, and also how do we take into account SSGs in our organizational level, but also when we are planning and performing the projects. So some basic information. So we are the biggest research institute in Nordic countries. We do multidisciplinary research and innovation programs. We work a lot directly with the customers, so industry, that's the third share of our projects. And then we have our own projects. For example, now we have the big project related to quantum computing. I think that we have the first quantum computer in Nordic countries, at least, as a research institute. And then we have, of course, a lot of jointly funded projects, both international level and EU level, and also in the global level. So, environment, social governance. Of course, we need to have some kind of a platform to really put those issues on our agenda, and that's, of course, in the company like us, Research Institute, it's our strategy. So we have made our 5 choices that we should follow every day. Always aim to impact, always create impact together with the customers, always lead for excellence, always drive sustainable business, always build the world's most meaningful place to work. So the choice 4, always drive sustainable business, is now the key. And it's really now being the goal for this year. It will, of course, continue also next year. So activities, actions, resources are now put on this issue. So we established our sustainability program more than a year ago. So, of course, big companies have had that kind of an entities already quite a long time, but for the Research Institute, it's still kind of a new thing. So it took quite a lot of planning and implementation that we did it, but now we are in the way to put it into practice. So here are our sustainability priorities, and our program is built on this. So of course, in the Sustainable Foundation, we talk about that because we are the Research Institute. The research ethics, research integrity is the foundation, impeccable ethical principles, human rights, environmental performance, data management, because of course the data is something that is in the really core of any kind of a research organization. So those form a solid basis for our research and businesses. But of course, We need to take care very well of our professionals, treasure safety, well-being, diversity, fair treatment of our brilliant minds. We need to select our customers also, that they understand and work with us to build up a really sustainable and responsible solutions. And of course, let's say the ultimate target is really to support a resilient society. So of course, we identify the world's biggest challenges and work through innovations and research and cooperation to find some solutions for those. And as you can see, we already have here marked the 5 most, let's say, identified SDGs. So of course, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, responsible consumption and production, and climate action. And how do we have identified these 5? So we have integrated SDGs to our research proposal preparation phase. So every time when researchers find a goal, find an idea, they need to do this kind of an internal research proposal preparation to our intranet, and there you need to also link your project to a certain SDGs where you see that this research will contribute, will make positive impact to a certain SDGs. And of course, like I said, we have our sustainability program, but we have a lot of other, also some new entities and positions that really support both ethics management, but also kind of on sustainability related issues at VTT. So RRI manager is a new position. We are, of course, the member of the TENK, follow the TENK, so Finnish National Board on Research Integrity Guidelines. We have our own research integrity advisors in different business areas. We have our ethics committee, competence officer, whistleblower channel, lots of data and courses in internet courses. Some of them are compulsory, like our research ethics course, safety and security course, and things like that. But most of things really work via now this new sustainability program and task force. So that's really important now for our organization, that we have allocated resources, we have identified and prioritized our tasks in this matter. And I think that the first speaker of today, Karol Dobrzyniecki, already mentioned the neutrality of technology. I'm talking about the same issue, but because we are trying to raise the awareness and discuss that how ethics, let's say the broader concept of the ethics is related to the development of technologies and innovations. So then we show this statement from Malvin Kranzberg to our researchers and also the other personnel, which says that technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. And what do we mean by that? Of course, that with the same technology, you can do different things. So it's a kind of a multi-purposes that you can really do with same technology, good things, bad things, and some other things. So you should think about these issues in a broader sense, even when very low technology readiness level. And sometimes it's more relevant and sometimes maybe not so relevant. So it depends about the resources. It depends about the really the project definition and the project call. So how these things relate to each other. So of course, RRI is the process that how do we really perform our work. So there we need to have the structures, resources, and different positions. So governance that really supports our doings, our research work. So of course, ethics, like I mentioned, research ethics, research integrity, but the broader understanding that what is ethical behavior and what could be the positive impact or negative impact should be considered. So of course, you cannot, or you can do, of course, some kind of an heuristic ethical assessment. But of course, if you want to have this kind of a broader view, you need to engage stakeholders broadly. So now, of course, we talk about a lot of quadruple helix, quintuple helix, and that includes policy, research, industry, but also civil society. So citizens should have some kind of a voice also, at least when developing, let's say, big projects that have regional impact. Then, of course, like mentioned, diversity, including gender, but not only gender issues are important. Science education, so capacity building. So it's not only that we educate, let's say, the others, but it's a mutual learning process. So capacity building, kind of an empowerment is needed for any kind of a project. And of course, we need to be transparent, but we need to have this open access and to share our results, good experiences, bad experiences, because failures also teach a lot. Of course, then if we think about these research integrity principles, reliability, honesty, respect, and accountability. So when we do our work, of course, we need to follow those. So I think that when we talk about the research integrity, it's usually have this, like Paweł Łuków was saying in the second talk, that it has kind of this bit of negative connotation, so that it's a burden, and we just try to avoid misconduct. But we should take those principles in a positive way, because of course we want to really respect our colleagues, research community, environment, cultural heritage. And if we do our work with the respect, then we, of course, want to make our research setups in a way that they produce reliable results, and we can deliver our results in an honest way, and then we feel responsible and accountable in what we are doing. But if we lose that respect, of course, we do not have the motivation probably to do those things in a best way, in a reliable, honest, accountable way. So, like I said, then the targets or goals we have now integrated the SDGs, which is pretty much something that we could also use when talking about the ESGs. So SDGs are now the targets also in many EU calls, but now also in our organization we have integrated them in the assessment that how project is making impact. But it's not only assessing the positive impact. You should be aware and identify also the potential negative ones. And actually, you could probably, with the same technology, with the same project, have a very positive impact for a specific SDG, and then some negative impact also to the same SDG or some other SDGs. And then you should, of course, try to mitigate and justify that how you can avoid them or find some solutions to really decrease the negative impact. So that's the main point, really, to think about these issues. And of course, researchers may think that this is a kind of an extra work, but now currently also funders require a lot of more, let's say, more realistic view to the impact, but also, of course, then, like I said, we will have this directive soon. So that, of course, mainly is concerning us in the organizational level, but of course also the project level is important, because of course a lot of things, also emissions, but also from the sustainability experience, a lot of things happens in the project. So of course that's the next steps that we are probably doing even next year, to really try to go deeper that what happens in the project level and identify those issues, but also take them to the sustainability plan for the project, that they in the planning phase can already take this into account, but during the project evaluate their workings and how they should proceed when they find something that could be improved. I think that I have used my time, so I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Veiko. I see that we already have questions for you, so we'll have
Thank you.
we'll return to the questions in, I think, about 15 minutes. Thank you so much. Very, very, very interesting talk. And now the final talk today. It's my great pleasure to introduce Gosia Płotka, who's pedagogical innovator designing humane way to facilitate critical and innovative thinking at the University of Northampton. And Gosia will tell us about education for responsible development of technology. Hi, Gosia, great to see you.
Great to see you, Maciej. Great to see you all. Can you see my screen?
Sure.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
That's good. Yes, that's great.
Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. So maybe let me start that way. So yes, I'm at the University of Northampton, but my journey started at Polish-Japanese Academy of Information Technology in Gdańsk, or actually Gdańsk University of Technology, where I got my degree. And somehow I landed in Northampton. Why I'm saying this? Because this is all what made my journey and what is important for me. So it's not so much maybe about me, but about the values that are important for me. So at some point, I discovered that there is no reason to introduce new methodology. When I started to work, it's more important to educate people to find a way to solve the problems. So this is something what I would like to talk today about. I mean, that was my view. That is not the point. Yes. Right. Okay. So where do I believe I sit with the ESG? Because I usually work with SDG, so I use this mapping here. So I believe that I sit with the quality education and SDG 9, where we're talking about the companies, yes, reduce inequalities and partnership for the goals. I'm really happy to be the last one because I can easily relate to everybody else, especially two gentlemen that start, including you, Maciej, and I don't remember the name of the first person who was talking at the moment, and three gentlemen that were talking just before me. So when you were talking, for example, about responsible research and innovation, so this is all sitting somewhere there. Right. Okay. So let me start that way. How do we teach? Because this is something that was at the very beginning of this last panel session mentioned. So we tend to teach computer ethics. Some of us as civic ethical issues, which is actually, yeah, then it's good to hear that. Some of people who teach computer ethics discussing social and legal aspects of computing. Some looking at identifying different stakeholders' perspective. Some of us looking at or bombarding students, and I'm purposely using the word bombarding with lots of philosophical underpinning. And when I was looking through different curriculums, I also discovered that some people using the computer ethics, or however you want to call the module, for teaching people how to do the CVs. So usually when we're talking about teaching computer ethics, this is a very like a model that can cover absolutely everything that cannot be put somewhere else. And it's okay, yeah, right. So in the literature you can find, so you have one of the examples here, but there is more. I just quite like how those two guys put it together. That the way how we teach computer ethics makes it not necessarily very suitable for engineers. So people finding it boring, people finding it overwhelming because of the amount of philosophy that is involved. and we have lots of different directions. Yes, I think this can be one of the reasons. Can be that we starting so in the UK, the education system is very much different than in Poland. So we don't have technical universities anymore. There used to be technical universities a while ago, but they were all converted to the universities. So all the courses, including computer ethics, are going through the same process with really strong academic underpinning. And so computer ethics modules are those when students learning how to write, how to read difficult articles, and so on and so on. And students finding this overwhelming. And I believe it's similar in USA. So it is not, they're not necessarily, let's say, this is not necessarily finding it relevant. So this is how I put it together. So this is something that I drew based on my research. So students who want to learn about computer ethics or want to become a computer scientist in the future, they are put into this or face these ethical issues, and they find it difficult because it's not something that they normally learn, and it's not something how they normally learn. So basically, yeah, they're finding it overwhelming. With the research as well, I found out that one of the ways how people can find it a little bit more easy to learn is by building the connection and by helping them to learn together. So that as well helps them to overcome fear of failure, because this is module that is troublesome for them, that is counterintuitive for them. They're more afraid that they're going to fail than any other. So what you can see here, this is a combination of two theories. One is community of practice, and second is something what is called threshold concepts. Threshold concepts is actually this theory that talks about teaching difficult topics, and is talking about this liminal space when people, when they find themselves, they lost. Yes, once they go through this, then they feeling more comfortable, and they feel much more empowered, and they know what they're doing. But the point is to go through this. So what can we do to help students to go through this space? Like you can see here, one of the things could be like building the connections. So this is exactly the thing. So once we help people to build connections, to be together, something what they not normally do on the other models, this is when they start to discuss things and think critically. This is another thing that is very important. What I observed and I hear from students, they're not necessarily taught to think critically. On the right-hand side, you can see this is my concepts to get built together. You can see that I'm also a computer scientist, probably by the form of this. So what I'm saying here, that if we help students to build connections, be together somehow, discuss the difficult topics, this is the way when they are getting more familiar, and they see different perspectives. So this is something what computer scientists need. So computer scientists needs to be able to see the stakeholders' perspective. We had people who were talking about UX today. So this is answer to that. Yes, we need to be able to see what our customers, what our users are likely to feel, see, and so on and so on. Another important thing here is that many things that we're talking here about are abstractive. So concept of ethics is abstractive. All the computing aspects are very abstractive. So what we need to do to make it easier to understand, we need to give a body to this abstraction. So one of the ways to give body to abstraction is by using metaphors, using storytelling. So including these elements into teaching somehow, I will show you in a second how I do it. help students to see different perspectives, to see different ideas. You can see here as well, so Maciej said about umami. Umami is a method to build or to design strategy, to design experience. And this is something what I include here. So following principles of umami, we're first thinking about the needs of our learners. So I would say that in here, the deeps of our learners is to have some meaning with what they're learning and have some connections between what they need and activities. So they not necessarily need to, they don't feel that they need to know what different philosophers said. They need to know how this applies to their experience. They need to feel that they grow and they have opportunities to grow. And they need to feel secure. So they need to feel that they can do it and they're not going to fail because of the confusions, for example, here. Like I already told you, it's important as well for them to be together. So what you see again on the right-hand side is the ideal. So there are four possible situations, but the ideal one would be the last one where we have inclusion. So where we have all the people playing together. Umami, when we design a product or service with umami, it says as well that it's good to be different than others. So I would say here we can try to be so innovative, stimulating, yes, radical, involved. So we want students to be involved, and possibly we want them to have some fun and play together. There's nothing wrong with having a little bit of fun. Okay, so what as well I discovered is, this is kind of maybe a little bit of going towards the conclusion what students need. So we know that students need something that makes sense to them and makes sense to their practice. So they need some meaningful activities. They want to know something what happened and analyze different case studies. They want to do some group activities, and so these are outcomes from the research with students, but as well experts in the field. And it's also helpful if what they do when they talk about the computer ethics is included in something else. So, for example, their dissertations. So if they ask, apart from do, for example, risk analysis, like a normal or traditional, let's say, call it for the purpose for a second, traditional risk analysis, if they ask to do something what is called impact analysis. So they saying how they action, how the different function impact different stakeholders. And they adding this as a part of the risk assessment, for example, of the product. So they may look at how building certain features of the application can impact maybe quality characteristics of the application. Both students and experts in the field find guest lectures quite good and useful, especially if you have guests that can share with their experience, and some practice. So students can take some practice and they can feel that they can do whatever is facing them, they face in the future. So what we've done, or how we found helpful to teach is by using Lego. So I'm a Lego Serious Play facilitator. So I'm giving students bricks that they use to bring the ideas. And once they build the idea, so everyone builds the idea, and then using metaphors, using storytelling, is describing things to different people. So they may say something about towers, they may say something about, they may say something, so yes, this tower can be maybe built of different bricks, that is diversity maybe. So different aspects. And then at the second stage of the work, they ask to put it all together. So to find what they have in common, what they have different, bring closer those that are in common, separate those that are different. You can see lots of post-its as well here, or lots of piece of paper where students annotated what they learned. So they're starting to annotate what they learned. Once they're starting it, annotating it, it's much easier and much meaningful for them to do some further research, do some reading, and they can as well include it in the dissertation. So this is something what we've done in the classroom. There is as well something that we've done during COVID when classrooms were virtual. So we asked students to build out of whatever they had. And like you can see, I choose, I think, yeah, one of the there was a number of canvas like this that I have somewhere. So you can see here some students using bricks, some students using cotton pads, for example, to say something, and you can see as well what they were saying about what they learned. So what is the outcome? So students finding that by using metaphor, they can see different people's thoughts. They become more thoughtful. They to the degree develop some self-awareness as well. So in general, the results were quite positive. You can see here. So the results, as there are two sets of results. The one at the bottom are my first results with computer scientists. The one on the top are with groups of the project managers, just to have to compare this. I've got as well some qualitative feedback when students were saying that they felt part of the group, they felt appreciated, and they actually, especially when we had the offline session, they appreciated it. Those when we had the online session, this is where they found a little bit more lost, so they didn't necessarily appreciate as much when we were using MS Teams. But when we are in the classroom, they really working together. I still do similar exercises, connecting ideas with different group of students, but as well with professionals, and I can see that it works. Okay, I believe that I'm with my time, or even more than my time.
Thank you so much, Gosia. It was very, very inspiring and an important issue discussed here. So I'll be glad to go deeper and ask a question about it. But I think we'll start with questions we already have, because it's time to go to Q&As now. And I'll start with a question for Dr. Dano. We have a question from Dr. Emilia Kaczmarek, and here it is. How would you operationalize the value of transparency? If there are technologies that are inherently untransparent, like deep learning neural networks, but very effective, should we prohibit the use of them in a risky context? And what technical methods of getting rid of bias in big data would you recommend?
Okay. Let me deal with the data first. I have absolutely no idea. That's not my area of expertise, so I can't possibly comment. And I'm sure there are multiple valid methodologies. What I would be concerned about is that whoever implemented one documented what they had done and also could justify why they had used that methodology and so on. Apart from anything else, that will be useful in the long term for us to assess whether particular methodologies are better or worse than others. As for the black box phenomenon, I think that is often overstated on the part of software developers because it's convenient. We can certainly do what we call black box testing. I don't have to, for example, look inside the engine of a car to put it on a test track and test its abilities. We have well-established mechanisms for doing that, but in addition to which, they're simply going to have to change what they build. So what I'd like to do briefly is just share out, if I can, some of the guidelines where we do operationalize the transparency requirement. So this is the EU document. And so we're not asking people to think in terms of values. We're not asking them to reason. We're bypassing all of that. As Gosia said, it's well established that that's got to be built into the education. We're giving them concrete tasks. So design mechanisms to document how data acquisition, storage, and use happen. This needs to be auditable, and it needs to cover both the development process and once it's operational. Other things here, ensure the design includes mechanisms by which the AI system will record its own decisions so that they can be subject to human review. And then we talk in more details about it. So it's as simple as that. We're just saying you have to build these functions into your system. And in a lot of cases, they also require changes in the development technology and the organizational processes and so on. And we anticipate there'll be a few years where there's a transition. And we're not saying in detail how this should be done. That's not our purpose. Our purpose is to simply say, at the end of the time, your development process must have met these, have fulfilled these tasks. Your organization must have these structures. You must have these processes. You must have these mechanisms. It's up to you to work out how to fulfill them within your organization, your coding strategies, etc. And there are some IEEE standards like IEEE 7000, which is actually a formal standard now on how an organization can design its values that it then builds into its systems. But we're leaving that up to them, and I'm sure people will move in those directions. And as I've said, we're seeing further methodologies develop. For example, DC Check just around data. Google have an extremely good system that they published a few years ago for the organizational processes for keeping track of transparency and so on. And so we'll just push the industry to move in that direction. But again, the key secret is we're giving them concrete tasks. We're not asking them to think. Now, it is reducible to a checkbox, but those checkboxes are, have you done, this huge piece of work?
Okay, thanks a lot. I have one more question to you, for you. I'd like to ask about the thing that you mentioned in your presentation. You said that applicants, as far as the Horizon Europe is concerned, that they have to comply with the ethics by design requirements. Do they really have or can comply with the? Is it obligatory?
They have to develop. They have to demonstrate an equivalence. So if they're not complying with those specific guidelines, they're going to have to show that they're meeting what those guidelines require anyway, in some way, shape, or form. And yes, at this point, if they can't do that, then they'll be at minimum sent back with a note that you need to bump up your ethical component, governance components and design components. In some cases, we're asking for additional work plans, tasks. We're frequently saying a couple of lawyers with a background in the law on this stuff is not sufficient. We're still trying to deal with this fact that people confuse legal requirements with ethical requirements. Yeah, generally speaking, most of the time, if we can, we just send them back and say, you need to bump up this stuff. But in a lot of cases, we have to reject them. And in a lot of cases, we're simply saying the objective itself is unethical, or it simply cannot. The way it's designed, the way you've designed it, you simply would never be able to comply with these requirements. You're going to have to go back. And recently, we sent a project back and said, you're going to have to start from scratch. And rebuild the whole thing from the ground up, because it's never going to, it's just not designed in a way that would ever make it ethically compliant, which also means when it's finished, it would never be legal to deploy it. And in one particular case, they actually said, what we plan to do is currently illegal, so part of the funding will be spent on lobbying politicians to change the law. Which is easy to forget because the funding is not for political activity.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Very informative. Thanks a lot. We've got questions for our other speakers. I have one question for Veiko. Can you please name an example of a flagship project run by VTT that has managed to integrate the dimensions of responsible research, sustainability, and research integrity?
I can mention, several projects and success stories, but I just put to the chat Francis project, which is coordinated by Fraunhofer, but we were really much in the core group to design the project. So it's about the frugal innovation. So citizens, target groups should be involved from the very beginning to design the environment, the appliances, the services. So RRI was included as an approach to be integrated to all the activities. Of course, research integrity is kind of a basic stuff, but then the sustainability, of course, because we are talking about the frugal innovation, it's already kind of an inside the concept. The challenge, of course, because we were going beyond Europe, so Africa, India, Bangladesh were the target countries. So we made mistakes. We went, basically, we should have included the local partners already as a partners in the planning phase. So of course, then you struggle that do you have the local contacts, networks, and ethics approval. So actually, we needed to stop the working in Egypt because we couldn't find a suitable partner. We are still struggling a bit with some other countries. So that's why I also put in the chat these ethical guidelines for working in Global South, because that's a really good document to really read when you are in the ideation phase of your project. So include the local partners, stakeholders when you go beyond the Europe, but also the guidelines are quite good in any kind of a context. So that's a good advice. We have been working as a coordinator in many energy-related projects. So basically, this SPARS project also in the chat, there we could really allocate a lot of resources to do this awareness raising inside the project, integrate RRI dimensions to the project, and also kind of have a continuous interaction and ethical issues always included to our board meetings, to the consortium meetings, trainings, exercises. So that's also one of the good examples. Now with lower resources, but still important that we were kind of taken as a team to this project is the Baltic Sea project in hydrogen energy. So it might not so very relevant to talk about, for example, gender and diversity issues when you are developing this kind of an energy valley between Helsinki and Tallinna, but they were clever enough to think about this, and now we can really discuss. It's a project that just started, so we are now in a phase that designing with the coordinator that how we do this. But those are the examples, and you can find them from the chat, and many more. Please go to the VTT website.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. Now my question goes to Gosia. I would like to ask you, Gosia, about the balance between the practical needs of students and the essential ethical issues that you need to tackle, that you need to discuss, because it's something that I was talking about in my talk, that you can't simplify things too much. So the question is how to balance those two things, and I'd suggest that you have about 90 seconds to answer the question, because we still have one more question and we are ending the session.
It's not so much about the balance. So this fun part helps to identify issues that can be discussed later, and you can go deeper with understanding. So it's more about conceptualization and identifying certain problems.
Okay, thanks a lot. So the final question goes to Dominik Zieliński, and the question is, how does the issue of sustainability of urban spaces translate into the inclusion of people with special needs, for example, people with disabilities or for ethnic minorities?
Thank you. So I was thinking about it for a moment, and I have an answer that, well, firstly, I think that it's a good question, and it more complicates the whole aspect, because we have another aspect to look after, and I think it is important. And for example, when we talk about the comfort and abandoning the comfort, it is getting harder, because how much comfort can abandon a healthy person and how much comfort can abandon, for example, elderly people, probably less, and all people who are more prone to sickness would not be as much comfortable with abandoning the comfort. So this is another challenge. Another thing, when I think about, well, Polish public institutions, there is this horrific trend of building concrete marketplaces, concrete centers, instead of like green marketplaces with trees, etc. Those places are not only not healthy for mental health, but also they can get quite hot in the summer when there is no shade, no vegetation to cover. It's like it's just boiling there. So I don't think it's a good direction for people with special needs. But I also think that when we talk about sustainability, and I think the abandoning of comfort can influence, encourage, actually, it could encourage cooperation. And in this case, people caring about each other because of more difficult situation might be actually good for people to, well, actually caring about each other and helping in difficult situations. So yeah, I think it's a really complex aspect, but they can be separated. We have to take into account not only sustainability, but the special needs as well.
Thank you very much, Dominik, for answering the question. This is the end of this session, and this is the end of the conference. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much for your very inspiring talks. And it's time for me to hand the microphone and the stage over to Piotr, who will conclude the conference. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Maciej. Thank you all. And if I want to conclude something, I want to tell you that during the conference, we discussed a wide range of topics relevant to law, ethics, technology, and innovation. Speeches covered technology neutrality, ethical review in research, nanosafety, nanomedicine, AI, fintech, ESG, of course, products design and challenging in the public architecture. The overall conclusion of the conference is that dialogue between different fields, such as law, ethics, and technology, is a key to developing innovation and responsibility solution that contribute to a better society. I conclude from the number of observed and interested parts that this kind of platform for sharing knowledge and experience in ethical are needed in the future. So for my side, I will send a link to all participants, asking them to complete a short survey. And I would like to sincerely thank all the speakers for their contribution and all guests to continue to collaborate in our future research project. And thank you all for today. I believe that we met in the future. So thanks and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. See you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you next year.
Thank you, and thanks very much, everybody. Very informative.